Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for the inconvenience. Today, we'd like to discuss how can state-of-the-art technology make your airport apron more resilient for a new norm after COVID-19. Our panelists today are Gareth Bristo, Head of Innovation and Continuous Improvement at AGS Airports. Also, Henk Jan Gerzee, Chief Digital and Innovation Officer at Amsterdam Airport Schiphol, and Max Diez, CEO and co-founder of Assaia International AG. Hello, dear panelists. You're welcome to introduce yourself.
I'll start then, I guess. So, Gareth Bristo, I'm the Head of Innovation and Continuous Improvement for AGS Airports. We own and operate 3 airports in the UK, one in Aberdeen, Glasgow International Airport, and also Southampton Airport.
Thanks, Gareth. My name is Henk Jan Gerzee, Chief Digital and Innovation Officer for the Royal Schiphol Group. So Schiphol was founded in 1916, and actually since then innovated our way to 2020, where we're now facing COVID. So I think this is a very relevant topic we're discussing right now, and also how we actually see this as an opportunity to accelerate innovation. So looking forward to the discussion.
Super cool. My name is Max. I'm not Christian Heen. I want to make that very clear. I'm just showing up here because we had some troubles with joining. I'm co-founder and CEO of Assaia. Assaia, I just realized, is 102 years younger than Schiphol. Henk Jan. Thank you. Thank you for the starter. Thank you. I'm not sure. I hope we will. The world will see Assaia's 102nd birthday at some point in time. I will most likely not experience that anymore. Yeah, I think without further ado, let's start. I just want to have a few welcoming and opening words before I turn the word over to the folks that are way smarter than us, Henk Jan and Gareth, ultimately. Currently kind of a subtitle of a lot of stuff that we see in the world and that we also observe in the behavior when talking, with potential customers is that I'm telling our team is the lizard brain has taken over the world once again. And what do I mean by that? Well, you guys most likely know that our brain consists of 3 parts, and that's actually something I learned a while ago on a YouTube documentation from a psychiatrist. Don't ask me why I watched that, but the point is essentially there is this lizard brain, right? And this brain, the story goes, only knows three ways to react to a threat, which is flight, fight, and freeze. And essentially a lot of the behavior that we're currently seeing in the world, I guess, can be traced back to this. And I think one of the major symptoms is, this toilet paper rush or craziness that we have been able to observe at the beginning of the crisis. So as a response to the crisis, people went out and bought toilet papers to the extent that no toilet paper was available in the stores anymore. And that's super irrational, right? So what are we observing right now, or have been observing? A lot of doom and gloom in the press, right? And this translates into the behavior of the people. A lot of people are pretty bluntly, they are afraid of losing their jobs. And that translates into, some kind of stasis where people stop to think about the future and to think about what's best for, the organization they're working in. They're just afraid of sticking out their heads because they feel this paints a target sign on their body, and they might be losing their job if they suggest to maybe make an investment into technology or something. So instead of thinking 1 or 2 years ahead, something that's totally normal in the infrastructure industry, like airports are, who often think, 10 or 15 years actually ahead. You guys know this better than me. Like everyone is kind of pausing everything. And I think the industry, that's at least my take as, kind of a technology provider, and obviously my opinion is somewhat biased as well, is I think that the industry to a certain extent is underestimating the impact that a vaccine will have, that will come, right? And demand will come roaring back. I see this in my family and the people I talk with. You know, as soon as we can fly again, we will be flying. We will be flying to holidays, business meetings, catch up with people that we know and haven't talked in a while. And I believe that it will be hard for airports and airlines to really match the, you know, sudden surge in demand, because they let go so many people. The US carriers are letting tens of thousands of people go, and because of the investments that have been postponed. So essentially that these few words should set the stage for what's to come. And our goal here today is with Gareth and Henk Jan to you know, put a little bit of inspiration out into the world, instead of all this doom and gloom and negative stories that we're reading, to show a signal of confidence and optimism, send it out into the world, and you know, see what some bold thinkers that are, you know, investing and thinking about how to tackle the future, what they are thinking and what's on their mind. That's essentially the goal, the subtext of today's discussion. So I would like to start essentially with the first question at this stage. And Henk Jan, I was curious, you know, what is your vision on technology investments in the light of the current COVID crisis and beyond?
Yes, great question. I think if we look at the situation today, then we need to be certain that we're not going to back to the old normal. Because if you go back 1 year ago, we were facing major challenges. If you talk about the world of aviation, it was in the lines of, okay, how do we become way smarter in our operation? How do we create a way more seamless experience? And how do we make substantial steps from a sustainability perspective? That has not changed. So also in the light of COVID and investing in innovation, which to a large extent is in data and technology, I think is more important than ever. The big risk is that organizations tend to apply, as I call it, corporate anorexia. So with a kind of cheese slicer, they make their organization smaller, and they can put it on 10% smaller, 15%, 20%, or even 30% smaller. But ultimately, it's not making your organization healthier. So I think what is very important that instead of using a cheese slicer as an organization, you go to the sports school and you train the muscles you actually need. And it also might impact some parts of your organization that they actually become bigger. Some muscles will become bigger. But on the other hand, some muscles will be less important in the future. And if muscles become less important, ultimately they transform into fat. And that's actually what you need to get rid of. So I think this time is very important that we keep the strategic focus, that we don't focus on today, but that we, of course, apply, the urgency of today to make the right decisions for the future. And that also means continue investing and perhaps even accelerating investing in data and technology. So that's my view on COVID and the impact on investing in data and technology.
So not losing the sight of, you know, medium to long-term investments, not falling back into, you know, well, we have to do something.
Yes, so the predictions are in 2024, passenger numbers are again at the same levels as 2019, and that's still a prediction, so I don't know, but assume that's the case. And if we don't improve along the way, then we're back to the old normal. And we still talk about the same sustainability matters. We still talk about how do we give superpowers to our operational staff. We still talk about, okay, how are we going to really enhance the experience for passengers without having actually done substantial improvements in years where we actually also had some flexibility. Schiphol welcomes close to 72 million passengers. It was 2019 numbers. 52 million pieces of baggage. 37% transfer passengers. Absolutely massive. So 40% of all passengers arrive by public transport. So if you look at the challenges for our staff, but also our neighbors and so forth, I think we're obliged to take steps to make sure that we get back in 2024 on normal levels way healthier than in 2019.
Interesting. Gareth, what's your take on this?
I agree. I think the big aim here is to use technology to advance the business, right? And it's so important going forward for the future of aviation. The issue I think we face just now as an industry is that we are in huge decline. Revenue numbers are down. Cost sits there. We need to drive cost down. We need to increase revenue. To do that, I think we have to be bold. We have to invest in new technology. But I think the focus of that technology has to be around efficiencies, data-driven decision making, etc. Who can afford to make mistakes nowadays in the aviation industry that can be costly? And at a time where cost needs to be driven down and revenues need to be increased, I think innovative technology is the way forward. We need to start thinking about new ways of making revenue streams. We spoke before this about the Hyperloop, and that sort of innovative technology is what's going to change the face of the aviation industry, and it's also going to be what brings the aviation industry back to those numbers. I don't genuinely believe that we're ever going to get back to where we were, because I think we'll diverse modes of transport going forward, and I think the aviation industry, and I'm talking from a sort of facilities and airports point of view, we need to look at different ways, different modes of transport. How do we get involved with future flights, so drones, technology, etc. So I guess to answer the question, our vision about future investments in technology is as big as it can be. We absolutely want to invest in new technology, but I think the reasons we want to do that are simply to drive costs down and increase revenue, because the world is changing. I think COVID has expedited that change, and I think the aviation industry is at a position where we either invest in new technology to do that, to achieve that aim, or we go back to the old way of working. And if we go back to the old way of working, we're just not going to survive as an industry, or certain parts of the industry just won't survive.
Mm-hmm. Given the fact that we're at the same time living in a time where company performance is measured in quarters, and most likely the motto for 90% of the companies on this planet currently is save as much cash as possible, because we don't know how long the crisis will last. I imagine it's much easier said than done to we continue to invest into the future and becoming more efficient. So what are you very specifically doing to overcome internal resistance to start projects that are not, tightly related to handling the COVID crisis?
So for us, it's about benefits before challenge, and that's actually one of the mottos that we live and breathe by in AGS. And we encourage the staff to think about, because the staff are the people who have the new ideas. So everybody's got an idea how to improve something. So we encourage the staff using that motto, benefits before challenge. And what that does is it allows people to open their mind up to what could be. So a lot of people will, and it goes back to your first slide, that lizard brain, if you like, is right, we need to do this and we need to get on with it to achieve this. But when you stop and think about situations and you think about them logically without that hindrance of we can't do this because, you start to believe that things are possible. And if you believe that they're possible, then you can articulate the benefits of that idea. And then that idea can be moved forward, and that idea might get shelved at some point, but because the challenges are too great. But for us, it's all about benefits before challenge. What are the benefits to this idea first and foremost? What can we get from it? How can it benefit the business moving forward? Can it reduce cost? Can it make us more efficient? Can it reduce, or can it increase revenue? And then, if that stacks up, that then creates your business case and so on and so forth. So to sum it up, I guess, benefits before challenge. Think about the benefits before the challenges.
So you're empowering your coworkers actively to say, come up with new ideas. You're not going to get your head chopped off because, Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we all live in this world. We all use the aviation industry. We all go on holiday. We, fly for business and so on and so forth. There are things that we do, or there are ideas out there from staff and staff member, family members, etc. There are ideas there that once upon a time we would have told you, no, we don't want to hear them because we know best. We've been running airports for 100 years. We know how to do this.
Yeah.
The truth is we don't anymore. And as I said, COVID has escalated this to the point where we really need to catch up, or we need to get ahead of the game. We need to start thinking differently. So give us your ideas, forget about the challenges, tell us what the benefits of doing this are, and if it's worthwhile, we'll do it.
So there's a new, level of modesty going.
So. Yeah, people, and we're finding is people are coming forward with ideas, whereas they wouldn't before. They would have kept it to themselves because it was a stupid idea.
Cool.
And actually, it's growing arms and legs now. So we're seeing the innovation program at AGS kicking off now and picking up.
Fantastic.
Which is good.
Henk Jan, what are you observing in terms of the leadership that you're exerting? Has it changed somehow to also empower your fellow co-workers?
Yes, it is. So first of all, so the impact of COVID is very serious, with over 20 million infected people globally. However, it also does bring some positive change. So, and I would say from my innovation digital perspective, a positive side is it drives it, or it ensures that we focus on what matters most, which is very helpful. So what is our strategy and what is our ambition? Our ambition is to become the most sustainable group airport with highest quality of service. Okay, so what do we need to do to get there? And what can we still do from a smart perspective? How can we invest smart in the critical services we can offer at an airport? And at the same time, also make sure we can take steps and can continue to make steps from a sustainability perspective. So that's also actually the balancing act between do we invest in bricks or in bytes? And bricks are to some extent less effective from a sustainability perspective than bytes. Bytes are way more scalable. And the value of bytes is not just limited to the physical borders of Schiphol Airport. You can generate value beyond Schiphol Airport, so also to airports which are part of the group, like Eindhoven, Rotterdam, Lelystad, but also John F. Kennedy Terminal 4 and Brisbane. And so I think that is a very important element. Focus on what matters most, make sure we make smart investments, because cash is simply limited, but build it also in such a way that it's scalable beyond our physical borders. So I think it really helps us. Another item which is, I think, which further helps us is the aviation and the aviation ecosystem is in this together as one sector. So it also further supports collaboration within the sector. I think it is, the tracks which run in parallel without knowing are either very limited now or not existing at all. Of course, it happened in the past. And sometimes within your own organization, that you didn't know that something in parallel was happening. But definitely also within the sector. That is not happening now. I think the collaboration is great within the sector, and that's also a key ingredient to accelerate innovation.
It's interesting. So your first aspect actually to stay in your picture is about, defining which muscles you actually want to train, right? And disregard all the other stuff at the same time, not do this wholesale diet that you were mentioning, this wholesale corporate anorexia. That is exciting. And regarding the second aspect, that's actually a fantastic segue to another question that I've prepared here is, talking about airport and airline collaboration. How has the crisis impacted the collaboration between you as the airports and the airlines? And what aspect of that do you think will be, sustainable change that will last beyond the crisis, versus what is, just reactionary and trying to handle the current crisis? Henk Jan.
I would say if the means are limited, from a resourcing perspective and from a financial perspective, then that really encourages collaboration between airlines and airports, handlers, air traffic control, to make sure that we make the right bets. What matters most? What are our biggest challenges? And talking from an Amsterdam perspective, I say, how can we give our staff superpowers? And it's not just Schiphol Airport staff, but also airline staff, the handler staff. And you give them superpowers by giving the right insights. What is happening now, but also what has happened, but also what will happen. So we have invested already in the past years in a system called Wilbur, which actually enables airport controllers to look 4 hours ahead. So they actually know what is coming to the airport. So they can optimize the planning for security filters and so on. So we can ensure that the right staff is at the right filter at the right moment. So that's also why we call it, we give superpowers with data and technology. It's also about seamless, which is very important for the complete sector. Seamless is also, okay, how can we make sure that we optimally use the capacity at the airport? Ensuring there is a seamless flow. How can we balance the PAX flow also when passengers are arriving through the different security filters or immigration filters? Not just following one straight line to the exit. No, perhaps that's for certain flights, they are directed to the right, other flights are directed to the left, and some straight. And so optimally using the capacity we have to also spread the audience, which is very important also from a COVID perspective, and ensures there's an ongoing flow of passengers. So there's lots of initiatives still ongoing, which are very relevant in today's situation, but also very much in sync with the priorities, strategic priorities of smarter, seamless, and more sustainable. More sustainable is we're still investing in how can we get better control of the energy consumption of our assets and buildings. And if we're in control, that's simply reducing the cost. So that's one element. So when there's less cost, there are less energy consumption, also less CO2 emissions. That's a very important element there. So we try to hit as many performance indicators as possible also with the investments we do today.
Super interesting. Gareth, what do you think about the collaboration between airports and airline? Do you agree with the view that essentially the crisis is getting both parties closer, that are sometimes, in a more adverse type of relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with everything that was just said there. I mean, this is exactly what we are seeing across our group of airports, and we're speaking to some friends and colleagues in the industry in the UK, that the airports and the airlines historically wouldn't go against each other, but they wouldn't necessarily work together collaboratively. That this crisis is absolutely bringing everybody together. For example, in Aberdeen, we're working on a digital twin project just now, which is going to give us an operational advantage to bring a lot of silos together to make decisions with the right amount of information. Currently, information is key to a lot of the decisions that we make, but the airlines, for example, will have information that they won't necessarily pass on to us, and vice versa. And right. It's not for any other reason than we just don't realize what collectively we can do with that information. And so we're now working with airlines and handling agents a lot more closely to understand that how will that information benefit. So if I give you this piece of information and you give me that piece of information, how can we benefit each other? Cool. And the benefits are clear to see, but I think also as a spin-off for that almost, the working relationships that we have had in the past have got stronger, and therefore we are now seeing these airlines and handling agents coming to us and saying, have you ever thought about doing this, or have you ever thought about doing that? And it's opening up a whole new channel, a whole new pipeline of ideas for us to look at, with the ultimate aim of reducing cost, or helping that airline get that turnaround done quicker, or whatever the case may be, because that then makes us as an airport more attractive to that airline for future routes, which is what it's all about at the end of the day. So positive in that sense, and I'm all for it.
Have there been other projects besides the digital twin that you have been able to work on because of, this paradigm of benefits before challenges?
Yeah, so one of them, one of the other ones we're working on, Southampton is an autonomous bus service. So within the grounds at Southampton, we have obviously a car park structure there. The company that manage that car park for us have come forward and said, look, the autonomous vehicles, etc., why wouldn't you ever look at having a fixed autonomous bus route? And that's something that we've progressed forward to the point of trial next month, where we will actually have a self-driving bus in Southampton Airport, albeit at the moment because of UK legislation with a driver behind the wheel not doing anything. But we will be at trial stage there. Now, a lot of people will say, well, hold on a minute, you're going to do a bus driver out of a job. That's not the aim of this, and one bus service is not going to put somebody out of a job. However, it then allows people to see that, be inspired, start to think of other ways of implementing that technology, and then it leads on to other cost savings, etc. So and that whole idea has come about from our car park management team. So it's been really interesting.
Cool. Nice example, Gareth. Just to step in there. So we've also looked at our bus planning on airside bus planning. So yes. First of all, we've got over 700 electric vehicles already at airside. So that's also from a sustainability perspective very important. But we also looked at how can we make a way smarter bus planning? Because should we order additional buses, or can we make the planning way smarter? And I believe that you first need to optimize the planning before you can make something autonomous. Otherwise, you get something stupid autonomous. So we've worked with AI models to optimize the bus planning, and that's actually having a substantial impact on the utilization of the bus. So we can way better utilize, or the productivity of the bus has substantially increased. We do the same. So I already mentioned the example Wilbur, but from a service perspective to passengers. We now have self-service units in the terminal instead of the manned service kiosk. So that is from a cost perspective, of course, interesting. But from a service perspective, it allows us to way faster and way more consistent respond to any question from a passenger. And it's still connected via video call to service agents sitting at a different location. So that is actually improving the service level. So NPS has increased, but also lowering cost and making the service way more consistent than ever before. So there are many examples where you can actually be in either the triangle from a benefit perspective. So and enhancing the experience and lowering the cost, but also actually making it way better for staff, giving them superpowers to give the right information at the right time, or to allocate staff at points in the process where they can add way more value. And that's actually where we focus on most.
I'm just going to add there, I think as you start to digitalize more of your operation, the information flow gets greater and greater and greater, which then empowers your staff to make the right decisions about things. So it's all about data, but what comes along with that is new processes and new ways of working, which is where airports have got to get to.
Maybe give, some of our listeners are maybe not super versed in how do I tackle, this topic of innovation and what is the mental framework to really think about it, and what are, the KPIs that I should use to have some kind of a true north in my initiatives. Henk Jan, can you maybe share, your mental framework? How do you go along and decide, this is actually an innovation campaign or technology campaign that is worthwhile for me to pursue, versus that's not really in my framework. How do you think about that?
Yes, I think great question, and it's still a struggle for many companies to innovate in a way that we actually truly add value.
Right.
And I think what's very important for any innovator is to always embrace or to stay in love with the problem and do not fall in love with the solution. Too often individuals or teams fall in love with the solution and they lose sight of the problem. So spend substantial time on peeling the onion of the problem. I think that's absolutely critical, and always go back to the problem, because the problem can change over time. So the problem this year is completely different than last year. So it really doesn't make sense to continue with the same approach from a solution perspective. And so love the problem. Second is make sure that you innovate together with, let's say, the customer. And the customer can be internal, can be employees, can be passengers, can be airlines, can be the handler, for example, in our ecosystem. But do it together. So when we innovate, so for example, we've implemented turnaround AI at Schiphol Airport on the H-Pier. That's complete now. That's something we do not do in isolation, because then the value is also isolated. It's truly trying to understand what is important for the airlines using these gates, what's important for the handlers using these gates, how are we going to share the information we gather, making sure that this helps the complete ecosystem and not just Schiphol itself. And then we unlock value, but not just the value, we also create acceptance. You also get solutions which can be implemented and really drive value. So it's I think the key elements are stay in love with the problem, spend sufficient time on the problem itself. Do not fall in love with the solution.
With the solution.
I'm really not interested in solutions, actually.
Yeah.
And co-create.
Yeah. Gareth, what is your true north? What is the, your indicator that you're on the right way and you're doing the right things? How can airports get this gym membership?
I think for me, it's about understanding the difference between innovation and invention. People think that innovation, that you have to come up with something brand new that the world's never seen before, and that's not the case. And innovation for me is about taking other people's ideas and adapting them to implement them at our airports. So, but it has to be in relation to a problem that you've currently got. Like Henk Jan said, you have to understand what the problems of your business are to be able to innovate in that space. So you really, really have to understand what that problem is, and don't fall in love with the solution. Record the solution. It might be that solution will fit something else that you have a problem around. So my advice around that is, whenever you come up with a solution for something, record it, take note of it, don't forget it, park it on the shelf there and go back to it later. Go back to the problem that you're trying to solve and look about, see what other people are doing, see what other industries are doing, because there's a lot of innovative products out there, innovative ways of working that can be adapted to suit the way that you're working and solve your problem. So for me, it's really about problem solving and not invention. I think a lot of people get confused with that. They think innovation is about creating a new product that nobody's ever seen before. Yeah.
Okay, so keep a broad perspective and do your due diligence properly. Absolutely. Instead of jumping on the first train.
Absolutely, but record everything you come across, because there's nothing better than a bank of information sitting behind you that you can go to.
That's good.
And for me, it's also to step in. I think what the biggest asset is of staff working within digital innovation is their creativity and imagination, and also the luxury position we have is that we do not have to deal with the operation of today. So I think that's also very important, that the staff in my group doesn't need to deal with the complexity and the extremely hard work of our staff focusing on today, making sure that every day passengers can travel very safe in a very effective way, so that our staff can focus on imagining the world of tomorrow, and from there actually look back on how do we get there. So I think that is that's the most important asset, I would say, we have in my group.
Okay, so you're referring to the fact that people keep an open mind and essentially start on a blank page instead of being anchored and constrained by how stuff is working today.
Yes, a small example is, we aim to be a zero-emission airport for 2030.
Right.
So that's quite a statement. Zero emission
for an airport.
For an airport, yes. Yeah, so not in the air. So at the airport, zero emission.
Yeah.
At the airport, we also have taxiing aircraft.
Right, exactly.
Aircraft, they actually have the engines on. So how do we tackle this problem? So that really needs creativity and imagination, and also making connections with the broader world on actually what's out there. And then you can actually start doing a pilot with Taxibot, which is actually towing on a sustainable way aircraft from landing to the gate and back. And so that's a pilot which has been active over the past month at Schiphol Airport with some very promising results. But that's a completely new concept, and it's like that really needs creativity and imagination to be able to take these steps. And in close collaboration with actually the day of today, with operations, to actually make sure that we can properly run a pilot without affecting, of course, today's
stability. Yeah, makes sense. We already touched about, this culture and maybe the change in leadership to, say it's okay to experiment, it's okay to bring new ideas. I think, there is an embarrassing thought of, a failed project or something where, after a trial, a project just dies off, or you introduced a piece of technology that is actually not ends up being used or not in the right way. How do you think about that, and what is your culture around this like, Gareth?
So for us, it's a learning curve. If we start a project that ultimately doesn't work out for us, it's not a wasted investment. The time and energy that you've put into that will be used on something else. This is what I was referring to about recording things.
Right. Yeah.
The investigation, the time spent on that project will never be wasted. You've learned so much through that project that you'll be able to apply it to something else with a small adaptation. So it's never wasted. So we encourage people to look at solutions and if they genuinely believe, if you genuinely believe that the solution to your problem is there in this project, and you will resolve it, go with it. If it doesn't work, park it, start again, look at something different. So we actively encourage it. Projects very rarely get refused by us. Unless there's a heavy investment there and we also can't afford it. The majority of times we will say to our innovators, go and work out what the benefits are. If we were to do this, never mind the challenge, go and work out what the benefits are. And then, if it gets stopped at that stage, we know what the benefits of that product are. And if the world changes, as we all know it does, we can go back to it. So absolutely encourage it. Failure is there's no such thing as failure in innovation. It's just research. Cool.
And again, what are your thoughts about this culture of how to deal with failure essentially?
Yes, you could say there's actually no failure. So we are a highly agile organization, and I think what's very important for me and for the group is that we want to make impact and real impact. So that means we need to focus on right matters. We want to have fun. It's also important, and we want to learn. So impact, fun, and learning is also about failing, because you cannot learn if you don't fail. But we don't want to first invest millions in something and then learn that we failed. And so you want to have very short iterations and validation of assumptions, making sure that you're on the right track. And that's embedded in our way of working. So actually within my group, I don't see big failures. There are short failures, which is fine. But short failures for big wins are I think, great.
So overall, like the return has to match for the portfolio. All right, there's going to be some losers, maybe like in investments, but then as long as the bottom line is there is some winners in there, it was worth the effort.
Yes, and you need to give also the opportunity to start small. So when we started with turnaround AI, it's 1.5 years ago. It actually took a few beers and some pizzas to get with the first very, very small demo, which happened in the canteen at Schiphol Airport. So, and I saw this, well, I was really amazed. Wow, is this possible? And they, of course, completely faked it, but I was really impressed. And they said, okay, guys, come on. And this is now becoming very successful, but there are also many initiatives which you said early in the beginning, yes, it's great, but we stop now, because actually our passengers or airlines or other customers do not see the value.
I'd agree. There has to be a point with regular reviews that you're able and comfortable to stop a project. The benefit, I think, of doing that, especially at the start of an innovation program, is is you get people away from this term we call fixedness. So whenever we have a problem, people can only think in the same way that they've always thought. And what we do with innovation is we teach people effectively to think differently. And as I've said before, benefits before challenge. So that there's a benefit in failing, in that it starts to mold people to think differently. But you have to have a process in there that with regular review to say, right, we need to stop this now because there is going to be no benefit from it. It's not what we thought it was, but the positive is that your staff are starting to think differently. They're starting to get out of this fixedness of this is the problem, the only solution is this.
Super exciting. What are the aspects of the future you're most excited about? Just to maybe finish off the session in the inspirational spirit we started with. Well, what do you think over the next 3 to 5 years is the most exciting thing that's going to happen to the airport industry or aviation industry at large?
For me, I think it's the short haul. I think we're going to start to see the emergence of drone type flight for short journeys. And we're starting to look at that now. I think the electrification of smaller aircraft as well. Now, whether that electrification is going to be the conventional aircraft or whether that technology is going to branch off, we are going to see the electrification move into that drone industry, and we're going to start to see drones as a service for deliveries, etc., etc. But I genuinely think that the thing I'm most excited about in the next 3 to 5 years is seeing the small industry of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft start to emerge in UK and Europe, etc. And then how quickly, pardon the pun, that will take off. I think once we see that happen once and people start to think, hold on a minute, this is going to be the future of short haul. It'll just, people will put all the time and effort into it because it's a new revenue stream and it'll just take off. Super exciting. Henk Jan, what do you think?
Yeah, so I actually hope that we make big steps from a sustainability perspective. So there's no planet B. I think it's the biggest priority for aviation. It's our license to operate to tackle this matter. And it also goes hand in hand with electrification, sustainable aviation fuels. Also, One European Sky, making sure there are way more direct flights from point A to point B than now. Different modes of transport. So it's the multi-modal hub, better train connections to airports, but also urban air mobility. So I think that is to come. Will definitely not be complete in 2025 or 2027. Yeah. We'll need more time, but we are confident that aviation can be, from an emission perspective, zero in 2050.
These are some nice closing remarks. Let's open the session for the audience. I saw some questions, Jan Willem, around how to roll out or commercialize, a small scale innovation project, how to gain operational acceptance around that kind of stuff. Can you maybe put that in a few words?
One more time, please. Your question to me?
Yeah, Jan Willem will put it in a few words, I think.
Okay, Jan Willem, okay.
Yes, so so I think one of the key questions that we often see is you have this project from an innovation perspective, and Henk Jan, as you said, you want to have it in a small project, so if you fail fast, and there's not a lot of cost associated to it. At the same time, however, there's also a lot of proof in the industry that many of the innovation projects kind of, although they are bringing value, they are never really picking up. So they stay like this small scale project. I guess the question is, what can be done, or what are the key building blocks or milestones that one
that an airport would have to follow in order to really make innovation projects successful and roll them out so that they apply to the entire airport?
Wow. Great question. Have you got a minute? No, so I think it really starts with solving real problems. And so it's not a, so I really hate innovation theater. So there's a lot of theater happening around the globe on innovation. Really,
I mean, just to show something, do something, just to be able to show off.
Yes.
And we're doing some innovation.
Also, way too many people start with the technology. Don't never start with technology. Always start with what is the big problem from a user perspective, customer perspective, we're trying to solve. And how big is the problem compared to other issues? Really making sure that that also the innovation groups focus on what matters most. Then co-create, because otherwise you start working on a solution with losing sight of actually what's happening in the day-to-day operation, because it really needs to fit in the work or the daily lives of other employees, so or passengers or airlines. So co-create, because that is not only making sure that you develop the right solution, but also that there's acceptance for the solution. And then the implementation itself is relatively easy, because let's say the customer really embraces the solution, because it's not something they get from a transaction perspective. No, it's actually co-created. It's also their solution. It truly helps them. It truly gives them superpowers. So,
so having a degree of identification with the solution in order to get that buy-in from.
Yes. So we give demos. We give bi-weekly demos, not in isolation. No, we go to the customer. So we go to the terminal, either to demo with passengers, and of course the passengers are different each time, but or also to demo at the airport control center with the controllers. Okay, is this actually what you asked for? No. Okay, then we make a change. And yes, so we make the sprint plans together with them, so to make sure that we also answer their question and answer to their needs, and not to the needs of techies. So I think that is crucial, and also it's very relevant from an acceptance perspective, and that drives the value. And then it's easy to scale. So we have a way higher demand than our capacity is. That's also a very good position to be in, because then you need to set priorities, and if you don't do that in isolation, you do it together with businesses, with airlines, and so forth. What is really most important? That also helps you truly unlocking the real value in the end.
Henk, thanks a lot. Henk Jan, you raised a very interesting topic, and maybe to both of you, a follow-up question, if I may. Acceptance from the actual ground staff, or from the people that actually work in the future with this process or with this innovation. Would you say that you can, as much as possible, simplify it and say that most innovation projects die because there is a lack of acceptance on an operational level?
Yes, I would say they die because they have either fallen in love with the solution. So they build something which is not solving anything. So that's valueless. So that's I would say a nightmare for a team, because they've worked on something days and nights without value, or there's no acceptance. And there might be value, but there's no acceptance to implement.
I would all add to that is that what we generally find that they die because you haven't articulated what the aim of the project is and what it's hoping to achieve. I think if you can answer that question and articulate that in a way to people that lets them understand simply as that, what we're trying to do here and why we're trying to do it, then they'll start to understand the benefits, and then you can start talking about the benefits of what it is you're trying to do. If you then get that buy-in, because you're all clear on what you're trying to achieve here and why you're trying to achieve it, then stands a high chance of that project being successful. But if you can't articulate that because you've fallen in love with the solution, or you're doing it as a look at me, look what I've produced project, then it will fail.
Yes, and perhaps to add to this question, definitely don't forget the business change. Yeah? So sometimes the problems is raised. Yeah? So this is a big problem. And first, question the problem, because it's very likely that the first description of the problem is not the real problem. So challenge the
root problem. Maybe it's just some superficial symptom of a
it's a symptom of something problem. Else,
yeah.
So challenge the problem. Ask why many times, at least 5 times in a row. Yeah. But also question. Okay, then there can be a solution, but how is this going to affect the way you operate, and who is in charge of leading the business change? Because it can impact culture, it can impact the way of working, it can even impact the structure of the organization. If you try to implement an innovation.
It all starts with a problem. We find this in the continuous improvement process as well. If you dedicate a lot of time, a lot of resource to defining the actual problem with the people that the problem affects, you'll actually find that what the problem is not what you first thought it was. And I think that's where a lot of projects fail as well, because you go and try and solve the problem that everybody thinks is the problem, when in fact you haven't defined it enough to understand what the real root cause of the problem is, and that's what you need to fix.
Okay, that goes back. I think this quote is attributed to Einstein. If I have a problem, I spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem, not the solution. Yeah. Not sure if that was Einstein, but in that vein. Fantastic. I think looking at the time, I think we're gonna close this round right now. Or Petr, are there any further questions?
No.
I think that was a no. So Gareth and Jan, once again, highly appreciate your time in these turbulent times, that you spent the time with us, and that you took this opportunity and chance to bring some optimism and inspiration out into the industry world. Many thanks. We're very grateful, and all the best to you guys and your projects.
Thank you.
Very excited to see what's in store.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a great time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.